I remember this day vividly. And I was sitting there and I was making bricks out of straw and clay. And I remember it very vividly. It was the first time that I ever saw Moses. And it was an amazing thing. And I'd heard about this guy. Something about he came in, he heard God in the bush or something like that. And I remember he was walking into town, and I'm sitting there, I'm making bricks. And he just walked up to Pharaoh with this strength and this power. And I was kind of blown away by it at first. You know, I've never seen someone stand up to Pharaoh the way he did. It was really amazing. And the first thing he did, I remember one of the first things he did is he made frogs come out of the Nile, and they just came out of nowhere, and it was really quite annoying. It was, and I remember, but a couple of things, Pharaoh's buddies, they could do the exact same thing, and so I wasn't too amazed by some of the things that Moses was doing. But he claimed to be the servant of this God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I've heard of him. You know, I've heard of Abraham and my ancestors, and I suppose that this God he's talking about is supposed to be my God. But I'm a slave. You know, my parents are slaves, their parents are slaves, and my children are probably going to be slaves in Egypt. And so I'm just wondering, where was this God this whole time? And is he just showing up? And I just wasn't totally sold on it. But the more this Moses kept showing up, the crazier things that he kept doing. And finally, I mean, at one point, he sent hail in a storm that killed cattle and people. And darkness at one point was spread over the entire land of Egypt, but not where I live, in Goshen. So all of our people were just kind of looking at this like, who is this God? Who is this Moses? And I remember stories about my ancestors, and I would never think about them because I'd really totally given up on this God. But I remember these stories about a promised land. And I remember all these things, this land flowing with milk and honey, this place where that this God had given us. And I just never thought about it because we're not in it. Where is this God? And where is this land? Where is this promised land? And so the more I watched this, the more I was stunned at the things that he would do. And Pharaoh's buddies had quit trying to match him. And they just couldn't. They couldn't do the things he was doing. They turned the Nile to blood. And then the straw that really broke the camel's back. We went to sleep, and we were told to put lamb's blood over our doors. And when we woke up, I woke up to screaming one night. And I didn't know what it was, but when we finally woke up and the morning came, all of the firstborn in all of Egypt had died. And it was a warning. Moses had told Pharaoh it would happen. And he told Pharaoh, if he didn't let us go, then it would happen. And he didn't. And so all the firstborns died, and Pharaoh flipped. Oh, you haven't seen anything like what Pharaoh. I mean, he was livid. And he told us to get out. And you didn't have to tell me twice. Right? I was gone. We were all gone. Imagine thousands of people at the words of one man. I mean, we got up, packed our things. I packed the kids' stuff. We headed out. And it was just an amazing sight to see all these people just leaving. And I began to get these images again of those stories of the promised land. And this hope that I really didn't have in me, that I figured I'd be a slave my whole life, that my kids would be slaves their whole lives. But I began to get this hope for a place that I couldn't imagine. And it made all the hard times, all the difficult things that I went through go away. And seemed like nothing compared to this place that I could imagine. And you should have seen it. I mean, the kids were dancing in circles around their parents. They were so excited. And you could hear laughter for the first time in years. You could hear singing. because everyone was so stoked that we got to leave this place. The one thing I didn't know was how long of a walk it is to the promised land. We started walking, and I remember first we were excited. We're going, and we were walking all day, and we got way far away from Egypt. And I remember looking down at the ground as we were walking, thousands of us, and you could kind of see the dust of the earth start to, the little pebbles start to shake. And I wasn't really, it was one of those things like, why is he doing it? But it wasn't a big deal because, we're getting out of here. And the longer we walked, you could actually start to feel the earth start to vibrate. And it was almost like a mild earthquake. You could start feeling, but it was constant. And the dust, you could start to see the dust rise. And people started wondering what was going on. And we started talking amongst each other, what's going on? This isn't supposed to be happening. And finally, we looked up, and in the distance, I saw all too familiar Pharaoh's chariots. We just left. We just got out of here. I was on my way to this place that God's been telling us about, and here comes Pharaoh. Just coming full speed. There had to be thousands of them coming full speed at us. There was no way we were going to get away. And so we kept walking, though. We kept walking until we ran into the sea. Now listen, I'm not saying against Moses, but if you're running away from chariots, would you run to the sea? We don't have a boat, right? How are we supposed to get away? And I remember all my buddies, they kept saying, what is this Moses? Is he let us out here to die? Who is this God that came to save us? He's not saving us. We're going to die out here. We're not an army, right? We don't have weapons. And I was thinking, it was one of those moments, and maybe you've had these moments, where you don't know how you're going to get through it. You really don't. You can't see a way out. But you know that you're here for a reason. Right? You know that somehow, some way, God's going to pull you through. And I had no idea. I had no way of knowing what was going to happen next. But I looked to Moses, because Moses, you've gotten us this far. You've got to do something. And he's not really listening, but people are just complaining to him. And amongst all the complaining, he turns to the sea. I kid you not. And he just raised his staff against the sea, and this wind, like you wouldn't believe, started blowing. And I'm dead serious. The sea, it parted. And I tell you that I wish I could have Twittered it when I was there, but I didn't get service. And it was an amazing thing. And I remember my kids were like, Dad, check this out. I'm like, I know, I'm standing there with you. And we started walking on dry ground. And imagine thousands of people in absolute silence as they marveled at the way God delivered them and delivered us. It was absolutely amazing. And I remember telling the kids as we're walking through, don't ever forget what God is doing for you right now. Because there's nothing God can't pull you through. And I remember we finally got to the other side. And the chariots were still in hot pursuit. And the last of us finally stepped out of the sea. And Moses put his hand toward the sky. And the waves came crashing down and wiped out the entire Egyptian army. And I just stood there. I'm telling you, I stood there on the edge of the sea in complete amazement. Completely amazed at how God saved me. Completely amazed at what extent God would do to pull me through. And that when I didn't